Welcome back to the ChicoBag podcast. This is a show where we talk with people who are actually doing the work to leave things better than we found them. I'm Andy Keller. I'm founder of ChicoBags, and today I'm joined by Jillian Buckholz. She has 2 decades of experience building sustainability programs from the ground up, with a reputation for connecting people across departments and turning big ideas into real measurable action. She's currently a senior associate at Brailsford and Dunlavey, where she helps higher education institutions develop climate and sustainability action plans and move decarbonization goals from slide decks to campus reality. She's also a board member for the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. Jillian, thanks for being here. Let's get into it. So tell me a little bit. So you're 20 years in sustainability. What's your origin story? How'd you get into this?
Well, thanks for having me, Andy. I'm happy to be a guest on the show, so glad to be here. And for me, it was when my dad installed the can crusher on the wall in the basement, and my chore was to crush the cans and put them in the recycling bin and put them on the curb for garbage day. I guess
Okay.
recycling and garbage day. I was probably 10 years old, and I fondly remember around that time going to the grocery store with bottles and cans and putting them in the conveyor belt, and you could watch them go in the back of the grocery store for reuse. And I just remember being in awe that those things were turned into other things that I would use. And ever since then, the only thing I can ever remember wanting to do was to save the planet. It was my art projects in school to the clubs I was in high school. And a great high school biology teacher taught me the love of nature and how I could, take that saving the planet drive into learning about environmental issues. And so then when I went to college, I thought I was going to be a biology major, but then I realized everyone in my classes wanted to be a doctor. And I thought, oh, that's not really what I'm going for. So my dad gave me some great advice to read the course catalog, circle what's of interest, and everything was geography. So I switched my major to environmental geography after taking a class and learned that I could combine how people interact with the planet and my love for environmentalism into my academic career. And that's kind of how it all unfolded before I became a professional. Um, and then, you graduate from college, and those professors that encouraged me to switch my major told me to go to grad school. And I thought, well, this is crazy. But then I thought, well, the universe will decide. I was kind of in that mindset coming out of college, and I got into graduate school at Chico State. I'm an undergrad from Ohio University. Go Bobcats. Um, Drove across California with everything I could fit in the back of my dad's pickup truck. Um, 13 states and 11 national parks later, ended up in
Wow.
Chico in August, which is kind of like a desert scenario coming from Ohio. Didn't really know what I was getting into, no car. Um, and then started grad school because I wanted to learn just more about the issues at hand. And Chico's a great place for that. The department was a great place for that. The town and the campus have quite a strong environmental ethos. And so really felt when I landed there, I was in the right place at the right time. So that's kind of how it all unfolded.
And that's about the time I met you is when you came to Chico State. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you were involved in the sustainability conference, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, as a student, as a grad student, I was in the EAC Environmental Action Club, I think is what they called it at the time. And um, then, yeah, there was a conference put on by students, This Way to Sustainability, and did that as a student. And then was fortunate. I actually worked as a graduate student for the Bidwell Environmental Institute through the College of
Oh,
Science with Jen Rotnam,
uh-huh.
and had at the time was just learning more about what the campus was doing around environmental issues. People weren't really using the word sustainability then. Um, but there were a couple of schools that were hiring people to focus on sustainability. And actually, AASHE, I'm the board where I'm on the board now. They had just formed, I think, in 2005 or 2006, right around the same time. And Chico said, "Hey, we want to hire a position," and they asked Jen and I to help write the job description. And I was encouraged to apply, and I earned the position at Chico State. It was actually the first sustainability officer position in the California State University system. So that's kind of my 5 minutes right there. Yeah, so that's how
In
it all
what
started.
in what year was that?
That was I think it was the spring of 2005 when I graduated. So it had to have been spring of 2006, I think, when I officially took the
Okay,
position, or
so
the 05,
2006.
06 academic
Mm-hmm.
year, somewhere in there.
Yeah, so that is when everyone in America started going green. And that's when Oprah was on TV saying, "Hey, you all got to go green. You got to use a reusable bag, reusable cup." And we started seeing this, director of sustainability position pop up everywhere. So you got one of them. Um, so tell me about, like, how is sustainability? How has the idea of it evolved? Because you have a 20-year career at this point, and you went from Chico, I believe, to CSU East Bay, which is another Chico, or excuse me, California State University school. Did I get
I
that right?
So I started Chico, and then I
Yep.
left and went to AASHE as a staff person. I helped develop
Okay.
their sustainability tracking assessment and rating system, which is called STARS. It's kind of like LEED for buildings, but it's a way for colleges and universities to assess sustainability, not only in the built environment, but
Yep.
through academics, engagement, operations, and planning. So I was at AASHE for about 6 years and lived in upstate New York at that time, and then moved back to California to take the position at East Bay,
Okay.
before coming to
Gotcha.
B&D. Yep. So that's
Okay.
my
And,
move.
and so a lot's changed, I believe,
Mhm.
over those years as far as sustainability is concerned. What have you learned over those years as far as,
Yeah.
like, what works, what and what mistakes have people made in regards to sustainability?
Yeah. I mean, great question. I think in the early days, people were focusing on environmental issues, strong focus on the environment, save the planet, the fish, the trees, the birds. There wasn't a connection to people and how negative environmental impacts were impacting humans. And I think that is probably the biggest mistake in the modern environmental movement, was in the early days not making the connection to human beings, the social justice components, the equity components that are much more integrated now than they were 20 years ago, in my experience, make a huge difference in what people pay attention to and where they focus their time. Because if you have that human element and you understand, the impact on people, then you're more likely to pay attention
Yeah.
than, I'm going to help the ocean. Well, I don't live next to the ocean, but maybe I could think about, I don't know, where my e-waste goes if I live in a community where there's e-waste center in a low-income neighborhood, um, that maybe I wasn't even aware was in a low-income neighborhood type situation. So I do think the human component is a big shift in the movement, which I'm really glad to see happening more now, that connection. And also, more now you see the adaptation and resilience pieces. It's less about let's reduce our impact, let's mitigate emissions, and more climate change is here. We're seeing the climate crisis unfold in front of us. How are we going to adapt and be resilient in these huge, impacts that happen to us as a result? And that's been a big focus of my work now, but also I think just in the field in general, people are trying to think ahead versus to fixing what happened before.
Yeah. I I like that, the way you described that. When you were saying that, I was picturing, the old kind of saying of a tree hugger, right? Or, oh, you're a tree hugger. Well, no, I'm not a tree hugger. I'm a human hugger. Like, I'm a people hugger. I'm doing it for all of us. Um, so universities are kind of special, in my mind, that they're kind of a closed ecosystem where you have a lot of power to kind of craft the environment and do, universities are known kind of for research, yet, you can also try social experiments. So What have you seen as far as universities trying new things, and taking advantage of this kind of unique scenario that a university campus environment has?
Yeah, the energy sector, I would say, has been a huge one, especially from my vantage point at B&D. I mean, colleges and universities have the opportunity to totally revamp their energy systems and sources because they act like a city within a city, you know? It's much more manageable. And they usually have the say. Um, Especially if you're a private institution, it's a little bit easier, I would say, than if you're a public institution. I mean, private institutions out there, I know it's still a challenge. So, not saying that they're hitting the easy button, but we're seeing really cool advancements with geothermal technologies, ground source heating and cooling. A lot of equipment is just aging out because a lot of schools are old. They put a steam plant in 30 years ago, 50 years ago, and so to replace it can be cost efficient, it can be low carbon, and there's just a lot of cool technology out there. And a lot of people I meet that work in facilities, they have an engineering background, they want to do something innovative. And to be able to look at the advancements and what's happening with energy efficient technologies and renewables and coupling things, I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening out there. We work with Catawba College. They're doing a really an amazing job with renovating their student residence halls to be passive house and geothermal geo-exchange systems. Princeton has an amazing geothermal geo-exchange program, which is pretty impressive. I think that's the way you're going to see people moving more now too. Carleton College has done a great job with ground source heating and cooling. um, it's pretty awesome to see people understanding their impact, but also the opportunity they have with efficiency as educational institutions, and how there can be cost savings there.
I love hearing that because the way I think about geothermal is you're working with nature, whereas, kind of traditional fossil fuel heating systems, you're kind of working against nature. You're fighting nature, whereas you can work with nature. It's kind of like, swimming, trying to swim, in the ocean. It's a lot easier when, when you work with nature or in a river, which is cool. So for people that aren't totally familiar with what geothermal is. Can you explain like what the benefit is? And you also mentioned cost efficiency. So it sounds like it's not only good for the planet, it's also good for the budget, right?
Yeah, it absolutely can be. There are, of course, many factors to consider, but it absolutely can be. So, the cool thing about ground source heating and cooling that some people call geothermal, I just had this conversation the other day. So, geothermal is kind of like a bucket of technologies, like renewables is a bucket of technologies. So, one type of geothermal energy is ground source heating and cooling, where essentially you take hot temp. So in the summer, when your building's really hot, you can take that heat out of your building and you can pump it into the ground. The ground usually stays relatively same temperature. So it'll hold that heat. And then when you're ready to use the heat later in the winter, instead of paying a lot of money from your utility, you can just pull it back out of the ground. Now, usually there's a heat exchanger at the building to make sure it goes up or down to the right temperature. But it's basically using the planet as a battery, just like storing the energy you need until you need it later, which is pretty awesome. And I actually just saw a map come out the other day on LinkedIn. Some researchers, I'm sorry that I'm forgetting your names, researchers just put out a updated map of um, the areas in the United States. They haven't yet looked at Hawaii and Alaska, but are most viable for geothermal. And
Oh,
there's probably like a third of the country is just this dark red. Like it's very possible and worth it if you do it over here, mostly in the Western US. But that's pretty cool. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things you can do. If you built a steam plant on your college campus 30 years ago, congratulations. That's the last steam plant you're ever going to build on your college campus. And if you're, opening up the ground to build a new building or something or make a renovation, changing out the heat distribution system in your pipes can be super cost effective. And switching your energy from steam to low temperature hot water can be super cost effective. There's a lot of options out there. We have the answers, Andy. We know what to do. It's just
so,
doing it.
yeah. Well, I know like trying to get everyone to sit down and agree when, some people are old school, some people, aren't don't like to try new things. Some people are skeptical. Some people don't believe in climate change. There's all kinds of people that show up, and you've had a lot of success communicating across departments and getting buy-in. Like, tell me, like, how do you do that?
Another really good question. With the colleges and universities that we work with, I always want to know early on in a project, what do you care about? What are you making decisions around? Is it your athletics program being successful? Is it, a law I have to abide by? The state of Maryland has a new law where a lot of people are starting to pay attention to their emissions because they have to. Birdo is an ordinance in Boston around emissions in existing buildings that people are starting to pay attention to. So legislation can drive a lot of that decision making. But also, are you trying to increase your enrollment, or do you have a donor that has a soapbox issue they really care about? But really trying to understand what leadership cares about, what your students, faculty, and staff care about. If you can figure that out at a really simple level and have that be the lens that you really just put every project through, it makes it a lot easier to get things done. I also think you're not going to, we say this all the time. I'm like, do you want the everything in the kitchen sink plan? Because we can do that, but it's going to be a scatter shot, right? It's like you're going to do a little bit of everything and you're not going to do a lot of one thing. So let's try and focus on the few things that make a big difference to you and are really important to you that you can probably get done in a 3 to 5 year plan and go from there, because then you feel good like you made an impact. Knowing sometimes with, a large scale renovation, or you're changing on a utility system, or, you know, develop putting renewables on your campus, that might be like a 30-year plan or something like that. But there are going to be steps within the, 0 to 5 year time frame that you can incrementally get there faster if, you're focused and dedicated to it. I also think students, they are loud and they pay the bills. So speak up. Um, Colleges and universities exist because of you. So knock on some doors, have some conversations, trying to understand what's happening, because sometimes I think we can get heated without really knowing the full story. But also, just making sure that the leadership are aligned with what the campus community wants can be an easy way to get something done. And once you have those pieces in place, it can be pretty magical.
Yeah, it's interesting. So students that are involved, like what's the best route for them to be heard or to, affect change?
Yeah, so different ways. One way is take a class, learn about something so you can talk about it, and then go find a person on campus that does that thing and talk to them about it. But don't judge them and don't yell at them. Ask a lot of questions, try and create common ground and learn, and ask hard questions, have a good conversation. The other space is the bureaucracy. So usually in governance structures in higher education, there's a space for student voice. Meetings are usually public, minutes are usually online. It can feel like you're walking through sand, but if you show up and you're respectful and you have data behind you to back up what you're saying, or other people with you, then people will pay attention to what you're saying. Be persistent and consistent, but be respectful and be open. I think that's important so that you're not shut down, you know?
Yeah, that's good advice. So we talked a lot about the built environment, and I understand that energy consumption and building efficiency is a big part of sustainability and saving money. I guess from a behavioral issue and just the social experiment of people, and the operations of a campus, what have you seen done that you're proud of or that wows you?
Yeah, this is what I love. I'm really interested in the psychology behind why we make the decisions we do or respond to a situation in a certain way. I do a lot of engagement, focus groups, trying to get the right people at the table, trying to get diverse perspectives at the table. Um, and a really cool project that we worked on was the Climate Commitment Action Plan at the University of Illinois Chicago. And one of my favorite examples of this is you're going to develop a plan and then other people are probably going to implement it. And developing the plan's the easy part. Getting people to implement the plan, especially if they weren't involved in developing it, can be really hard. So one of the things that we did was have a ton of focus groups with the type of people that would be implementing the plan. And the sustainability officer at UIC met with bus drivers
Oh,
because trying to get people to use alternative transportation, what do the bus drivers think? How do the bus drivers think? What do they think about more people riding? Or like, what would they suggest with routes or making it more accessible? Or, what are the barriers? They're going to know. And I thought that was a really cool one. At East Bay, actually, um, won an award with UCLA for this one, which was pretty fun through the California Higher Ed Sustainability Conference. We worked with custodial staff on testing equipment, and we did it in multiple languages because not all custodial staff, English was not necessarily their first language. So we met with them. We paid them a stipend to participate in the program because I think it's important outside of your regular job. If you're going to take on extra work, you should be compensated in a way for that. So we were able to work that out. We had custodians come in and speak to students about what they did so the students could understand and what their challenges were. And then we came up with this idea that we should test the state of the art equipment. And I'm talking like bins on rollers with multiple pockets for different types of recyclables or compost and things like that. And we thought it was the best idea ever. And we were so excited about it. And we ran this pilot program and the custodians came back and they hated the equipment. And we couldn't believe it because we're like, this is the best, And they said that their custodial closets were designed to hold them.
ah,
So they didn't fit. So they couldn't lock their closet, or they couldn't put their coat in there too, or they couldn't reach their coat, or like it was just cumbersome. They didn't like it. So they didn't use them. And if we would have spent all the money on just buying all this equipment that we thought was so wonderful, it would have totally backfired on us. So running the pilot first was a really great experience. I mean, work with the implementers, I would say, like try to understand the people that do the work, their
yeah,
vantage point. Another great example, I was not involved in this, but I know UC Davis works directly with the nurses in the hospital to try and understand how to reduce waste because the nurses are in the room all the time. Waste is a big issue in the medical
yep,
sector. And they came up with this great program with, those red boxes where you put like hazardous waste or
yep.
used needles. Every room had one. And they worked with the nurses to centralize those boxes. So you had to walk a few extra feet, which the nurses were willing to do. But it was a huge cut down on waste or those materials going into the wrong bin and contamination. So I thought that was a pretty great example too of working, that engagement being key to achieving your goals.
Yeah, I think that's a great example because, then if you want to know what's going on, ask the nurse. That's,
Yeah.
that's,
Thank you, nurses.
yes, thank you. So, I mean, gosh, when you say that, it's just like, well, gosh, that's so obvious, but it's good to remember because it's not done very often. And, decision makers are making decisions thinking they know what's best without even talking with the people that are actually implementing it. So what great advice. What you know part of the last 20 years, people have made these declarations, oh, we're going to do X by this year, or we're going to be climate neutral, or we're going to be zero waste, or a lot of these giant claims. How do you what's your take on the idea of overpromising or greenwashing, or the idea of just not quite measuring things based on reality? Um, I guess to say it lightly. So what are your thoughts on this topic?
So, I mean, I think a commitment can be a good thing. It can be job security for some people that have to figure out how to follow that commitment. Um, it maybe doesn't have teeth, which it's good to, have some accountability in there. But I think a big, sexy statement to raise awareness can be a good thing, but there should always be action behind it. So if there's a big, sexy statement without a plan, that can be a little tricky. Um, so I guess an answer to that also is that I think when some of these statements came out, or people are saying, we're going to do this, and in 25 years, we're going to meet that goal. Goals are great. They're not always met. And I think what
Yeah.
we're seeing now is people are saying, whew, that goal for 2025 was last year, or that goal for 2030 is in 4 years. So what are we going to do? Also, I think when people were making those statements 20 years ago, a lot of them are aspirational, and the data collection and what you need to do to figure out emissions or whatever that might be has really evolved. And data tracking has gotten a lot better. Also, people are defining what it means to be, carbon neutral. What exactly does that mean? And scope 3 emissions are what from purchased goods and services that I buy? Like, how do I measure that? And I think there's been a lot more work on, how we actually measure these things and what they mean. So I'm seeing more now in the climate action plans that I work on, the sustainability plans that I work on. There's a financial analysis component always, and there's always like SMART goals and actionable strategies within a 5-year time frame. So do people still have these lofty, I want to be carbon neutral by a certain year? Yes, but you're also seeing in the emissions world, you're seeing the conversation change from carbon neutrality to decarbonization.
Yeah.
So it's less about I have to be zero in order to do that. I'm going to buy this offset, because offsets can be problematic.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they can be a black hole and you just don't really know like what is happening with that thing I'm buying. Like, is that really offsetting my emissions? To decarbonization, which is sort of the idea that why don't, instead of buying offsets, we reinvest those funds in ourselves to become more and
Yeah.
more efficient, to decarbonize more and more, because that's hard enough. So if you can set a 80% reduction goal versus a 100% reduction goal, might be more achievable for your organization.
Yeah.
Sometimes too, I say
That's it.
set goals last. Do all the work and then set the goal.
Oh,
People love to set a goal and and then do the work. I'm like, what are we doing? Why do we do it that way? So
that's a good, yeah, that's a good idea. Because then how achievable it is at that point.
mhm.
It's interesting about the climate neutral, because ChicoBag was climate neutral certified. Um, we are still part of that certification, but the name changed. Now it's climate label certified,
Oh.
and it has changed. So the thinking has changed from going from carbon neutrality, to essentially taking ownership of your carbon and doing what you can to reduce it. Um, so for example, we changed the way we dye fabric, and that has had a reduction in our carbon footprint, through that process, because we reduce water usage, energy usage, carbon usage by, huge percentages as a result. Same thing with our fabric. So, we switched from like a polyester, like a virgin polyester fabric to 100% recycled content. And that has a 30%
Amazing.
reduction in, in climate emitting gases as a result. So instead of buying an offset, we can now count, these decisions that we're making, as part of, our ownership of our carbon, which is a hell of a lot better. Because when I looked at the carbon market, you can buy, you know, carbon credits from a golf course, which, is never going to be developed, or, they're different, I guess, qualities of carbon credits. So that kind of just takes that out of the equation. And, and that's getting better as well, as you know. So, um, I'm wondering, like, if you had a magic wand and you can just use it to, I guess, change the way sustainability is done, or to do something amazing that maybe it takes years, what would it be? What would you use your magic wand for?
Man, it's a hard question to answer. I think one thing I would like to use. How many wishes do I get? um,
Oh gosh, let's just say one. What would be the one
okay.
thing? You could use
for
it
me,
once.
for me, I think it is a wand, right? So for me, I think I would love for people to think about sustainability holistically in their decision making in the organization that they work in. When I look at a college or university that I work with, I see it everywhere. And to me, it should be in every decision, because it is your responsibility as a higher education institution to educate future leaders of the world. And if your procurement decisions don't align with that, or where you buy energy from doesn't align with that, or what you're teaching doesn't align with that, then I think it's a huge disservice to future generations, regardless of what their major is. Um, so I would really love to see holistic approaches to decision making at the executive level, to consider sustainability and the environment and social equity. That would be my tap of the wand.
Awesome. Yeah, and they're all connected, so it's important. Which 20 years ago we weren't thinking about social equity and climate and people in the same you know field. So I think that's important to think about. Um, so if people want to work with you, I mean, you do, like, let's talk a little bit about how to work with your company, that and maybe AASHE, like where can people go to learn more about what you do and your company does, or what AASHE does and how they can get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So the firm I work for now is called Brailsford and Dunlavey, and you can definitely go to our website and check out our infrastructure, energy, and sustainability page there. There's contact information and some examples of our projects and a little bit more about what we do. When people ask me what I do, I like to share that we plan, but we also implement. So if you need advisors for your institution on everything, we're experts in everything related to higher education, from the built environment to dining to student centers. I work with the infrastructure, energy, and sustainability practice the most. So I tend to be more on the sustainability and energy side of things, but always happy to talk to people. In addition to higher ed, we work with K through 14, and also municipalities and venues. So you don't have to be a college campus to work with us as well.
Oh, cool.
AASHE, yeah, thank you. AASHE, the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, also has a website. You can definitely check that out. If you're someone that is affiliated with a college, your college email address can get you a free AASHE account if your institution's a member, and they might be, and you might not know about it. And AASHE has bulletins that post higher education sustainability jobs. They have webinars. They have a decarbonization academy that's going to launch in February. They have all sorts of online resources, an annual conference. It's a lot of great information if you're an educator, if you're a student, if you're a practitioner in the higher ed sector. It's a good one too.
Awesome. Well, Jillian, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today and some great advice for people. And if you want to check out more, we'll put the links in the show notes. And
Great.
thank you so much. And thanks for everything you do.
Yeah, thanks for everything you do, Andy. It was really a joy to be asked to participate in this. And I always love connecting with people in the field, especially people that I've known for a long time. So appreciate your
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.